A world without electronics.
Imagine waking up tomorrow and everything is silent. No notification sounds, no hum of a refrigerator, no glow from a screen. Every electronic device on Earth gone. No smartphones, no televisions, no computers, no power grids. Just silence. What would happen to our world, to our cities, our food, our health, our relationships, to the animals, the forests, the oceans, and the atmosphere itself? This is not science fiction. This is a thought experiment that reveals just how deeply electricity and electronics have become the invisible spine of modern civilization. Welcome to a world without electronics. A world we may not be ready for, but one that tells us everything about who we truly are.
Within the first 60 seconds, traffic systems collapse. Within the first hour, hospitals lose life support machines. Within 6 hours, global financial markets cease to exist. Within 24 hours, communication between nations falls completely silent. The world's aviation system, which moves over 12 million people every single day, grounds to an immediate halt. Without radar, GPS, or communication systems, every aircraft becomes a hazard. Emergency services cannot coordinate, police cannot communicate. Water treatment plants, which rely on electronic pumps and sensors, begin to fail, threatening clean water for billions. The first 24 hours without electronics would be the most catastrophic day in recorded human history. Not from a bomb, not from a war, simply from silence.
The silent harvest food after electronics.
The global food supply chain is almost entirely dependent on electronics. Modern agriculture uses GPS-guided tractors, electronic irrigation systems, satellite weather monitoring, and automated storage facilities. Without these, crop yields would fall by an estimated 60 to 70% within the first growing season. Refrigeration, the single greatest advancement in food safety in human history, disappears overnight. Billions of tons of stored food begin to spoil within days. Global shipping, which moves over 80% of the world's food trade, stops. Port cranes go still. Cargo tracking becomes impossible. Within weeks, food shortages would emerge first in cities, then spread to every corner of the world. Nations that depend on food imports would face severe famine within the first 3 months. Hunger, not violence, would become humanity's greatest immediate threat.
The cost of darkness medicine without power.
Modern medicine is inseparable from electronics. Ventilators keep premature babies breathing. Insulin pumps regulate the blood sugar of millions of diabetics. Dialysis machines clean the blood of those with kidney failure. Pacemakers regulate the hearts of over 3 million people in the United States alone. Without electricity, these devices stop. The human cost in the first 72 hours would be immeasurable. Hospitals worldwide would lose the ability to perform surgeries, run diagnostic imaging, or refrigerate vaccines and life-saving medications. The global pharmaceutical supply chain, which requires precise temperature control, collapses. Insulin, blood products, cancer medications, all lost. Mental health systems, already strained globally, would face a secondary crisis, as anxiety, panic, and social disorder spread through communities cut off from all communication. Medical science would not disappear, but it would be forced to return to the tools of the 19th century almost overnight.
The silent world.
In a world without electronics, the concept of global communication vanishes completely. The internet, which once carried 5 exabytes of data every single day, ceases to exist. No emails, no calls, no social media, no news broadcasts. Nations lose the ability to speak to one another. Diplomatic channels go silent. Military commands cannot be transmitted across borders. The risk of misunderstanding between nuclear-armed nations becomes a dangerous consequence of this silence. Within communities, humans rediscover older forms of connection. Written letters, town criers, signal fires. The speed of information falls from milliseconds to days or weeks. Isolated communities would not know what was happening 50 miles away. The world, which took centuries to connect, becomes isolated again within hours.
Nature's great recovery.
Not all consequences would be catastrophic. For the natural world, the disappearance of electronics would trigger one of the most dramatic environmental recoveries in Earth's recent history. Electromagnetic radiation, which many scientists believe disrupts the navigation systems of migratory birds and bees, would vanish immediately. Bee populations, critical to global pollination, could begin to recover within a single season. Light pollution, which currently affects 80% of the world's population and disrupts the behavior of nocturnal animals, disappears overnight. For the first time in over a century, most of humanity would be able to see the Milky Way. Ocean noise pollution from electronic-powered ships drops dramatically. Whale communication, disrupted for decades by sonar and engine noise, could restore across entire ocean basins. Rivers and ecosystems near industrial electronic manufacturing sites would begin a slow but genuine process of natural recovery. Nature would not mourn the end of electronics. In many ways, it would celebrate.
The climate paradox. Life without electronics, 60s.
The climate impact of a world without electronics is deeply paradoxical. Industrial electricity generation, responsible for over 25% of global emissions, stops immediately. Carbon dioxide output from power plants drops to near zero. Air over major cities would begin clearing within weeks. COVID-19 lockdowns showed a preview. Nitrogen dioxide levels dropped by up to 60% over major cities within just 1 month of reduced industrial activity. But the paradox is sharp. Humans would return to burning wood, coal, and biomass for cooking, heating, and light. Deforestation for fuel would accelerate massively. Without refrigeration, food waste would require far greater land use for agriculture. In the long term, removing electronics wouldn't guarantee a cleaner atmosphere. It would exchange one environmental damage for another. Older, slower, and far more intimate.
The economic reset. A world without electronics.
The global economy as we know it is built entirely on electronic infrastructure. Over 95% of the world's money exists only digitally, as numbers in electronic banking systems. In a world without electronics, this wealth does not transfer to paper. It simply ceases to exist. Stock markets, bond markets, currency exchange systems, gone. Supply chains that coordinate thousands of suppliers across dozens of countries collapse within days. Physical cash would briefly hold value, but without electronic payment systems, most businesses could not function. ATMs go dark, card readers stop, online banking becomes impossible. Within weeks, humanity would revert to barter, exchanging goods and services directly, as our ancestors did 10,000 years ago. The economic reset would be total. No corporation as currently structured could survive. No multinational supply chain could continue. Local economies, farming communities, and local traders would become the new economic centers of human civilization. Wealth would be redefined by land, labor, and skill.
A world without electronics?
Modern transportation is dependent on electronics. Cars manufactured after the mid-1980s rely on electronic control units. Without them, these vehicles become stationary objects. The global aviation system grounds. Ships without electronic navigation drift. Humanity faces a crisis, but not without solutions. Steam-powered trains could be restarted. Sailing vessels return to ocean trade. Horses, once a relic of the past, would become one of humanity's most valuable assets again. Bicycles, simple and mechanical, would become the dominant personal transport for billions. Energy itself requires reinvention. Windmills and passive solar systems would return to the center of civilization. The world slows down, not stop, but slow to a pace measured in days and weeks, not seconds and milliseconds.
The resilience of the unplugged.
The disappearance of electronics would not affect all nations equally. For communities that have never been deeply integrated into electronic infrastructure, the immediate impact would be dramatically less severe. Traditional farming, hand-powered water systems, community-based food storage, and oral communication systems would continue to function. In many ways, these communities, often considered underdeveloped, would be the most resilient in a world without electronics. The nations that would suffer most acutely are those most deeply integrated into electronic infrastructure. The United States, Japan, South Korea, Germany, nations where almost no aspect of daily life functions without electronics, would face a civilizational crisis. A deeply ironic reversal would emerge. The nations defined as most advanced would be the least equipped to survive, while communities that preserved traditional knowledge would become the teachers of a new world.
The human technology.
Perhaps the most unexpected consequence of a world without electronics would unfold inside the human heart. In a world stripped of devices, humans would rediscover each other. Families would eat together without distraction, and neighbors would need one another for survival. Communities would organize not around algorithms, but around genuine shared purpose, building their futures together. Storytelling would return as our primary way of preserving culture. Elders, whose wisdom has been devalued, would become essential guides. Children would grow up with dirt under their fingernails and strong bodies, discovering the deep creativity that boredom creates. Human relationships would become, once again, the most important technology we possess.
A world restored.
Let us be clear about what a world without electronics would give back to this planet. The mining of rare earth minerals, lithium, cobalt, and coltan, which devastates ecosystems across the globe, stops completely. Electronic waste, over 53 million metric tons per year, filled with toxic lead and mercury, no longer accumulates. Electromagnetic fields that disrupt insect behavior and long-term ecological balance disappear from the environment entirely. Nature reclaims its space as forests grow into abandoned roads and wildlife returns to formerly industrial areas. The night sky, stolen from humanity for a century, returns, and the circadian rhythms of millions of species restore naturally. The ocean floor finds quiet for the first time in generations, free from the constant vibration of shipping fleets. The planet itself begins to breathe differently, forcing a fundamental restructuring of how humanity lives on Earth.
The resilient wisdom.
One of the greatest losses of the electronic age has been the erosion of ancient practical knowledge. Traditional medicine, the wisdom of thousands of generations, has been largely replaced by systems dependent on electronic manufacturing. Navigation by stars, once mastered by voyagers across open oceans without instruments, would need to be relearned. Agricultural knowledge tied to seasons and soil observation would become survival critical once again. But this knowledge is still alive in indigenous communities across every continent. Still held, still practiced, still alive. A world without electronics would be a world that finally needs to listen to the knowledge systems it has spent centuries dismissing. The return of traditional craftsmanship, blacksmithing, pottery, weaving, would not be a step backward. It is a recognition long overdue. Human wisdom is itself a form of technology, the oldest, and perhaps the most resilient.
A new civilization from ruins.
Humanity is resilient. Within 20 to 30 years, the chaos of losing electronics would transform into a new kind of civilization. Population would decline significantly in the short term as medical and food systems struggle, a tragedy of almost incomprehensible scale. But those who survive would build differently. Communities would be smaller, local, and self-sufficient. Food would be grown close to home, water managed through mechanical systems. Medicine would blend traditional knowledge with surviving science. Education would return to apprenticeship, learning by doing. Libraries, protected collections of human knowledge, would become the most important buildings. This new world would not be comfortable by current standards, but it would be more honest, directly connected to the consequences of human choices, and more deeply rooted in the web of life.
The world without electronics.
This documentary is not a call to abandon technology. Electronics have extended lives and connected hearts. But the question is deeper than technology itself. If everything electronic disappeared tomorrow, what would remain? What knowledge have we kept? What skills live in our hands and not just in our devices? The world without electronics reveals that we are biological creatures, dependent on clean water, healthy soil, and each other. Electronics did not create our civilization. People did. Communities did. And if we lost every device tomorrow, it would be those things that carry us forward. The question is not whether we could survive without electronics. The question is whether we are using them to build a world worth surviving into. This is our mirror. What do you see?